I have seen the torch of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dreams some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all.
So with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this wonderful land of ours, I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we face and that affects so many aspects of our daily lives, from our interpersonal relationships, our marriages, our business affairs, our politics, our economic affairs, our international affairs. Every single aspect of our lives is impacted by the character issue. And if you'd like to join the conversation tonight, the number to call is 501-258-8326. That's 501-258-8326. We are live tonight, Sunday, February 18th, 2018. We are live tonight, and you can join the conversation. If you have a question you want to ask me, if you have a situation that you think would interest the audience, maybe you just have something you want to share. In any case, give us a call at 501-258-8326, and I'll be happy to take your call. Well, interesting week once again. You know, it seems that there's always a tragedy to have to report on these days. Not a week goes by that you don't hear something in the news about some horrific act committed by some disgruntled or deranged individual. So we're going to talk about that tonight. I have 3 or 4 topics I really like to discuss tonight. I'd also like to discuss the article I posted on my blog at drgeorgesimon.com or manipulative-people.com. Either URL will take you to the same place. I'll be talking about some principles in my books, too, and I'll be saying something about my upcoming book on the 10 Commandments of Character, because I've been getting a lot of inquiries about that. And the book, as you know, probably know if you've been a regular listener, has unfortunately by me been delayed now almost a year. So it's my fault. I admit that. I'm pretty meticulous about certain things, and I am editing this book. And I am a stickler for accuracy, and I have refined my thinking on a few things, and plus I want to give the book a slightly different slant. And because it's likely to be my last book, I care a lot about how the book finishes out. So I'll be having something to say about that too. So we have several things to cover, but nonetheless, if you want to join the conversation, if you have a question you want to ask me, a situation you'd like to talk about, or just something you think the audience would like to hear about that you'd like to share, give me a call at 501-258-8326. That's 501-258-8326, and I'll be happy to take your call. Well, first let's talk just a bit about the tragedy in Florida. You know, one of the reasons I was not live last week is I just happened to be in Florida for a family event that was not too far from where the Parkland, Florida tragedy took place. Matter of fact, it was only 4 days after I returned that we heard about the tragedy for the first time. And, you know, there's been a lot of debate about the senseless violence that seems to plague us. So there are several issues to talk about here. But at heart is always the character issue. It always comes up. Now, some folks may not like what I'm about to say. Some may even find it insensitive. But when we go looking for explanations for these things, it is just amazing to me how we seem to leave character out of the equation. Now, I am not here to discount the role of various other mental health factors. I'm not here to discount the role of trauma in a person's life. But character, among other things, is kind of like a psychological immune system. You know, when values are deeply held and embraced, when they're part of the core of who a person is, then they hold the person up in trying times. Now, there are some mental illnesses that afflict people that are what we call professionally endogenous, which means that something simply goes wrong in the biochemistry. Stressors are not the cause, although they might contribute. And environmental events are not the cause, although they might contribute. But something just simply goes haywire. Something goes a little haywire in the wiring. To make a very complicated issue a little bit simpler to talk about. But those kinds of situations are actually quite rare. More often, character plays a role, and it's a significant role. And unfortunately, what's happening on a fairly grand scale, and has been happening for years, is that our young people are not entering late adolescence and early adulthood equipped with the resources to handle life's slings and arrows. They don't emerge in late adolescence and in early adulthood with the character necessary to withstand the trauma that is inevitably part of life. Now, it is a fair debate, and I actually see both sides of the argument. It is a fair debate about whether or not anybody, especially the seriously mentally ill, should have access to automatic and semi-automatic firearms designed to kill lots of people. Understand that argument. I also understand the other side of that argument. The other side of that argument is that the framers of our Constitution actually sought to protect those very kinds of things because, among other things, that Second Amendment protects us against a government that becomes tyrannical and by right of the people has to be overthrown. And if that government makes it impossible for people to have weaponry, then power is pretty much assured. That's the one thing, that's one of the things that the framers sought to protect against. I see both sides of the argument, but we can't leave character out of the equation. Now, there's no doubt that this young man who committed this atrocity was disturbed. Whether he was in the throes of a mental illness that was strictly, I use that word very carefully, solely of a biochemical nature. In other words, who he was as a person had nothing to do with it. Something just went wrong. He didn't really know what he was doing. We don't know that. That would be tragic enough. But more often, we have too many individuals among us who have not developed the character necessary to deal with life's slings and arrows, to bear life's difficulties and overcome them. Without lashing out in horribly destructive ways. And by the way, it is one thing to suffer, to experience pain as the result of stressors and trauma. And it is quite another thing to have both the capacity and the will and the lack of compunction to violently assault innocent people because you feel bad. That, my friends, is without question a character issue. And we will not solve that problem legislatively. We will not solve it. People who are of a mind to do horrible things in their pain or their discomfort will find a way. Would we be able to outlaw, for example, pipes that could be loaded with explosive material so that somebody could set off a pipe bomb. Will we outlaw bottles that can be used for Molotov cocktails? We have to. Will we outlaw all knives? We have to get really serious about what's ailing us. I think, unfortunately, and this is just my opinion, I actually think that we're unfortunately in an age of such character depravity that we probably have little recourse but to abridge our freedoms. You see, that's the whole premise of this program, folks. That's why you hear the theme song that you do at the beginning, at the end of the program. This patriotic piece that my wife and I wrote back before the turn of the new millennium. The premise is that character and freedom are entirely interdependent. John Adams made the point about our Constitution and our form of government. He made the point that it would only work for a religious, as he said, and moral people. Give folks with a solid internal moral compass maximum freedom. Leave them alone. Don't restrict them. Don't tie their hands. Give people who know how to take care of themselves and know how to take care of one another responsibly. Give those people maximum free rein, and they will do fantastic things. They will not only prosper themselves, but they will create opportunities for others, and great societies emerge. But the opposite is also true. In the absence of character, in the absence of a solid internalized moral compass, in the absence of a society characterized by sound, internalized values, widely held and lived out, in the absence of that, there is the constant invitation to impose restrictions on people's freedom, to try and manage the society through rules, regulations, laws, and restrictions, all of which inherently restrict people's freedoms. And our character crisis has reached such a point, unfortunately, where we face the constant invitation to restrict our freedoms more and more. It's a tragedy. Pains me more than anything else. And we can have an honest debate about the wisdom, basically, of the prevalence of so many firearms that serve no other purpose but to cause mass casualties. And we can certainly have an honest debate about whether we should ever allow such weaponry to fall into the hands of certain folks we know are at very high risk. I have very, very serious concerns about us passing laws, however, that make it impossible for someone who's ever carried a mental health diagnosis, a mental illness diagnosis, to purchase a firearm. You see, the whole concept of mental illness is poorly understood. There are very few. Well, there are two issues here. And I don't want to get too sidetracked, but this needs saying. For one thing, for a lot of different reasons, too numerous to explain right now, for a lot of different reasons, people going to seek help for their problems are given diagnoses that they actually don't warrant. Believe it or not, many times the correct and most honest and truthful diagnosis is no diagnosis. I'll repeat that. Many times, the correct diagnosis is no diagnosis. How can that be, you say? Well, because many times people have situations that they're dealing with that they just want some expert advice about. But they also don't want to pay for it out of their pocket. They'd like their insurance carrier or their health plan at their work or whatever the case may be to pay for it because they pay hefty fees for that coverage. And in order to get reimbursed, the clinician has to confer a diagnosis. Because if they give the correct diagnosis, which would be in some cases, in many cases, actually no diagnosis, they wouldn't get paid. Or if they gave the appropriate code, which is a code that would indicate that the person came in with a problem that they wanted some help with, but that problem didn't rise to the level of a true mental illness, then they still wouldn't get paid. They still wouldn't get reimbursed. So we have all kinds of folks out there who have at one point or another received a diagnosis. Would you deny them their right to defend themselves? We have a lot. And then, by the way, would someone who had a history of an illness that at some point made them fairly high risk, but they're not ill anymore, would they be barred for life? There are so many issues. I get so concerned about how we would approach this. You see, freedom always hangs in the balance. That's why if we don't really get serious about the root of so many of our problems, the true root of so many of our problems, all kinds of negative ramifications are going to occur. The reason this program is called Character Matters is because it matters today more than anything else. And unfortunately, it doesn't get the attention that it needs. Perhaps you have a different point of view. Perhaps you have something you want to chime in about. Perhaps you have a question you want to ask. In any case, if you want to give us a call, do so at 501-258-8326. That's 501-258-8326, and I'll be happy to take your call. Well, I posted an article on the blog at manipulative-people.com or drgeorgesimon.com. That's drgeorgesimon.com. Friday afternoon, past Friday. Another article in a series on narcissism. And this one talked about the irreverence of narcissists and how it contributes to their haughtiness in their character formation. And I've talked before about reverence and irreverence. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that tonight. A lot of folks kind of equate the whole idea of reverence with religious ideas. They associate, for example, we give the term reverend to ministers of various religions. And when we talk about reverence, we often talk about it in the context of reverence for sacred things. But this whole life, this whole miracle of creation, is just that. It's a miracle. And it's a tenuous one at that. There is a fragile balance that has to be maintained for life to even exist. We take it all so for granted. It's not a guarantee. This life, this existence, is an unearned, miraculous, incomprehensible gift that by rights ought to be revered and reverence for life and the value of life and reverence for creation and of the miracle that is creation is an essential aspect of developing sound character. And unfortunately, too many among us are not taught to revere much. We live in times of plenty. It is an age of indulgence and entitlement. We have a lot, and we take it all for granted. There is very little reverence for this miracle of creation, this miracle of life. And that lack of reverence often leads to a haughtiness. And it can become extreme, as it does with the narcissist. You see, narcissists have no respect for anything bigger than them. Matter of fact, they don't even recognize anything bigger than them, anything more important than them, anything more powerful than them. They're the center of their own universe. And as one famous clinician once said, legends in their own mind. They have this massive sense of entitlement. And it's reflected in all their relationships. And unfortunately, in a culture of narcissism, in a culture of entitlement, in a culture of indulgence, these kinds of attitudes not only thrive, but are rewarded. Which is why we have so many self-absorbed, self-centered self-indulgent, haughty, irreverent people among us. It's really that simple. So how do you teach reverence? That's a good question for the audience tonight. If you want to call in, you might want to share your own thoughts on that. How do you cultivate reverence? Those of you who have children and who have struggled with raising them to have character, to be of sound character, how do you teach? How do you instill that sense of reverence, that sense of awe and wonder and positive regard for this miraculous gift of life and all that we enjoy in this wondrous, magnificent creation? You know, we human beings are not born aware. We're not born capable. We're not born skilled. We're not born socialized. We are inherently social creatures. We need each other to survive and prosper. We have these brains, that's for sure, these incredible brains, but they have to be developed. And it takes so long. Just think about how long it takes to really raise a child to the point where they can function independently and properly in the social arena. Hour after hour, day after day, year after year, for not 1, 2, 3, 10, 15, but 20 years or more. And these days, folks are starting to figure out how to function well in their 30s and 40s, some in their 50s. We're the only creatures on the planet that take that long to learn how to function adaptively among one another. And we require being instilled with values, and those values have to be reinforced. And therein lies the problem. When you grow up in a culture of indulgence and entitlement, things are not going to turn out well. It is not innate for us to have values. They have to be instilled. We have to learn them, and they have to be reinforced. Unfortunately, modern culture promotes and even rewards self-centered, self-focused, self-indulgent, entitled behavior. And it's costing us. It's costing us. Let's go back for just a minute to this tremendous tragedy that occurred. As I mentioned before, it's one thing to have suffered hurt, to have suffered loss, to have experienced pain, trauma. All of us experience those kinds of things. It's one thing to have that happen. It's another thing to lack the character resources to deal effectively with those things, as effectively as possible. And even the strongest characters can be overwhelmed by severe trauma. No question about that. But it is still another thing entirely to feel entitled, to lack the compunction, to have even the capacity, let alone the will, to turn one's hate or to respond to one's pain by violently lashing out, especially against the innocent. That's a character issue. And if we don't get serious about addressing it, in the 12-step programs, the common thing you hear said about those programs and the 12 steps, the first step is actually a little bit more complicated than people say colloquially, but you hear people say the first step in dealing with a problem is admitting the problem, acknowledging it, calling it out, naming it. Well, the elephant in the room for several decades now has been and is now and is only worsening. The elephant in the room is character. And it's the last thing called out. Matter of fact, most of the time it's never called out. Why aren't we talking about it? Why aren't we marching in the streets? Why aren't we doing more? Why aren't we doing more to preserve, protect, and defend, and to revere the institutions necessary to foster character development? That starts with a healthy family, a marriage that holds together, that's based in sound regard for another human being, that embraces certain principles and values, a commitment between two people to honor not only each other, to be faithful not only to each other, but to the values necessary to develop not only their own character, but the character of any children that they might bring into the world. It once was a rare event that families didn't hold together. Today, it's a commonplace event. Why? Largely because, I know I'm simplifying here, but largely because not all the time, but largely because when people have had enough dealing with problems, they want out. Sometimes it's more insidious than that. Sometimes They just don't want to make the commitment or keep the commitment. There's too much out there, too many other things attractive to them. And then there are those cases where, without knowing it, a person got into a relation with someone with seriously flawed character. It wasn't evident at first. No person should have to put up with horrendous verbal, emotional, or physical abuse. But that's a character problem too. So, it all boils down to the same thing. I hate to say it, but that's the nature of what we're facing. And I'd love to hear any competing or contradictory view. I know some of you might disagree. That's fine with me. I'd like to have a discussion about it. So if you have a different point of view on it, you're welcome to give us a call at 501-258-8326. That's 501-258-8326. And I'll be happy to take your call. You know, to get back to the topic of reverence. Oh, and by the way, I said I was going to mention something more about the upcoming book on 10 Commandments of Character. Oh, and I just remembered, too, I need to let you know about workshops. I've been mentioning on the blog at manipulative-people.com and drgeorgesimon.com, I've been mentioning that workshops will be starting again the middle of the year. There will be in June workshops in both the Philadelphia area and in the Dallas area. I'll have information on the blog site soon under the on the seminars and workshops page. So you can go to the blog in the next couple of weeks and you'll find information there. So workshops will be beginning in June. There'll be one-day workshops for the most part until this fall. And then I'll be doing some 2-day advanced training later on in the fall. And those 2-day advanced trainings, seminars, will be simulcast webcast. And that should make the workshops available to a much wider audience. So stay tuned for more details about that and look for more details on the website at drgeorgesimon.com or manipulative-people.com. And you'll find some information in the next couple of weeks posted. And like I said, the first workshops will be in June. The venues for June will be the Philadelphia area and also the Dallas area. So look for details fairly soon about that. Workshops beginning once again in June. It's been kind of nice to have this hiatus and not be traveling around as I have been so many times. And I also, once again, want to mention the books, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, the international bestseller. I have some news about that. We are soon to be in the mainland China market as well as the Taiwanese market. And we have 2 other foreign rights inquiries that we're processing right now. So it will soon be a 23 language international bestseller, I hope. We even had another inquiry from Turkey. Unfortunately, a Turkish edition was actually published about 20 years ago, but it was a bootleg version, an unauthorized version of the first edition of the book. And matter of fact, I didn't even know about it for a long time. Became aware of it quite by accident when I got an inquiry from somebody in Turkey who wanted to ask a question. And then I learned of the book. But this time we have a legitimate inquiry from a legitimate publisher. So we'll soon be in 23 foreign languages. So that's In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, many regard it as the definitive book on the subject of manipulative people. And then my book, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, the compendium, the more comprehensive book explaining all the various disturbed characters out there that you're likely to encounter, what makes them really tick, how they really got to be the way they are, and especially what to look for in the way of help when you're trying to get help either for yourself or for a disturbed character. Because as many folks have learned the hard way, dealing with character disturbance is a highly specialized art, and unfortunately, all too many people have gone for help only to end up experiencing what we call therapy-induced trauma. In other words, they ended up feeling worse because they went for help and they didn't get the help that they needed. As a matter of fact, things only got worse. So that's why I wrote Character Disturbance. And in Character Disturbance, you'll find the groundwork for the 10 Commandments of Character that is still in press. I do at least outline those 10 Commandments and talk about them just a little bit and their role in character development. So you can glean some things and get a preview, basically, of what will be forthcoming in the book. And then my book for the Christian faith community, The Judas Syndrome, about how genuine faith, not faith on the lips, but faith in practice, can truly save a person and truly elevate a person. So that's my book through Abingdon Press, The Judas Syndrome. And then lastly, my book with Dr. Kathy Armistead, my co-author, Dr. Armistead, How Did We End Up Here? The Relationship Partner's Guide to Surviving and Thriving in this crazy, mixed-up, character-disordered world of ours. It tells that relationship partner how they ended up where they did in that toxic relationship and what they'll likely have to do to avoid a similar circumstance or fate in the future, and how we ended up here as a society in this character-disturbed mess that we've been in for so long. I urge you to avail yourself of my books and to avail yourself of the hundreds of timely articles on the blog at manipulative-people.com or drgeorgesimon.com. A wealth of information, treasure trove of information there on how to deal with a wide variety of circumstances and explaining a lot of things that people have questions about now in this character-disturbed age of ours. But what I wanted to say about, once again, about the upcoming release, hopefully in the next few months, I'll have more to say. I'll keep you updated. But the reason I am spending so much time on this likely last book of mine, The 10 Commandments of Character, How to Lead a Significant Life, it's again co-written with Dr. Armistead. The reason I'm spending so much time on it is that because I know this character problem to be at the root of so many of our social ills, I wanted to be clear about what it takes to instill And what we have to do as a society to reshape our culture to properly form the character of our young people. Not just that. It's not just a book about properly forming the character of young people. It's about addressing those folks who have already grown up but lack the character resources to function properly in life, function responsibly in life, to hold the relation, to form an intimate relationship with another person and make that relationship last, to make a marriage work, to raise a family properly. It's meant to help anyone in any stage of life understand and embrace the principles necessary to function adaptively in life, which is so hard to do in this character-disturbed age of ours. It's incredibly hard to do. Not only is there no reinforcement for it, but there's all kinds of attention and reinforcement given to those who behave badly. So that's why it's so important to me to get this book out there, and it will when it's right. So bear with me. We'll get it out there, but only when it is right. We're getting close now to the close of the hour. So if you've been thinking about joining the conversation tonight, I'm actually a little surprised tonight that we haven't had more activity on the phones, because a number of folks tried to call the viewer line or the listener line at all kinds of hours. Wanting to get through, perhaps they saw the number on the website, reading one or two of the articles, or maybe even the last post on Friday, and so I thought that we would have more callers tonight, but it's turning out to be one of those evenings where we just haven't had some calls. So if you do want to join the conversation, once again, the number to call is 501-258-8326. That's 501-258-8326. We have about 7 or 8 minutes left before we have to close. But I want to say one more thing about the interdependence of freedom and character, which is going to be highlighted. The sentiment is going to be highlighted once again in the song that you will hear close the program. It is just an undeniable truth that freedom demands responsibility. It comes with a price. And responsibility only arises out of character. So freedom and character are entirely interdependent. And each one of us has an obligation to preserve the freedoms that we enjoy. And how we're going to preserve those freedoms is by making it safe to have them. When people have solid internal moral compasses and they behave responsibly, there's not the need for massive, repressive micromanaging of their lives. That need only arises when people behave irresponsibly. And that's always a matter of character. Always. So that's where we have to focus our attention. our precious freedoms hang in the balance. You'll hear that sentiment in this song. The other sentiment has to do with what really makes a society great. We have had various periods in our country, periods of true greatness, and periods where we rightfully ought to have been ashamed of ourselves. And even though de Tocqueville is quoted as having said it, even though he didn't actually say it, there's truth in the quote attributed to him that America is great because it is good. And when it stops being good, it will cease to be great. Well, we have ceased being great. And what's going to restore our greatness is not what some people are saying. It's not in our military might. Just becoming stronger militarily won't make us greater. It's not in our economic power. Just becoming richer will not make us greater. America's greatness, during those periods of greatness, has always resided in the character of its people. When we have a society dominated by people of sound moral character, people who understand the ideals that they're urged to protect and defend and to advocate, and who embrace those ideals and live them out in their everyday life. When our society is dominated by those types of individuals of such sound character, then there's nothing we can't do, no problems we can't tackle, no situations we can't solve, no heights we can't reach. That's what makes America great. That's what can make us great again. There's an interrelationship between the character decline that we've witnessed and the cultural erosion responsible for it. As more and more character-impaired people dominate the population, more and more of our cultural institutions that fostered character erode. They become corrupted. The family unit being one of the biggest ones. And as that happens, unfortunately, more and more character-impaired people emerge among us. So I'll keep writing about it, and I'll keep speaking about it, and I'll keep talking to you about it every week on this program on UCY.tv at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific Time, because, as the title suggests, character matters. Perhaps today more than at any time. There's too much at stake. Way too much at stake. So, thanks for tuning in, and I will hopefully see you again next week on another edition of Character Matters, and I hope you will take seriously my urging that you visit the blog at manipulative-people.com or drgeorgesimon.com. Avail yourself of the resources there, and then come back and see me again next week on another edition of Character Matters. This is Dr. George Simon. I thank you for tuning in. It's always great to be with you, and I'll see you once again next week, 7 p.m. Eastern on UCY.tv.